That. So my name is Ray Almanza. I'm a mission educator promoter with the Maryknoll Fathers and Brothers. And we will introduce the others who are participating and also our partners. But just to tell you a little bit about Maryknoll first, Maryknoll is a Catholic society of apostolic life of missionary priests and brothers. And for over 100 years, they modeled themselves after the compassion and love of Jesus in reaching out to those in the world who are most in need. I'm part of the Mission Formation Program, which responds to Pope Francis's challenge to the church to create a culture of mission, in which all Christians respond to their baptismal call to be missionary disciples. And for us at Maryknoll, care of creation is one of the top priorities, especially within our mission education department. It's also a defining issue of our time. So I'm really excited about us partnering with the Catholic Climate Covenant around this project of Wholemakers, and also for all of you who are willing to join us and to be a part of this as well. And so with that, I want to invite Diana to take it from here and talk a little bit about the partnership and also about the covenant.
Thanks, Ray. Hi, everyone. It's good to have you here tonight. My name is Diana Marin. I work with Catholic Climate Covenant as the Young Adult Mobilization Program Manager. Catholic Climate Covenant was founded in 2006 as a bridge between the Catholic Church and people of faith who want to get involved in care of creation work. So we provide education, resources, and programming around care of creation across the US. I'm really pleased to be able to share with you about Wholemakers, which is an integral ecology curriculum that we'll be able to delve into tonight. We'll get to hear from the group that spearheaded the efforts to create this curriculum, and I'll introduce them in a minute. But I just wanted to share with you some background around Wholemakers. You might have clicked through and seen a little bit about the curriculum, but I'm guessing for many of you, this is your first time and you want to learn more about the curriculum. I'll just dive in for a few minutes and share with you what it's about. Before we talk extensively about Wholemakers, I should remember we begin all things as we do in our Catholic community in prayer. I invite you to take a posture of prayer. This will be a short meditation, short prayer that is taken from our Wholemakers curriculum, and that is inviting us into being in relationship with the land and with our earth. So with that, we'll begin. Our opening prayer will begin to help us notice the connection between our physical body and the ground. Medical biologists are discovering the positive health implications of reconnecting human bodies to the Earth's surface, grounding ourselves. We invite you to place your bare feet or hands on the ground during this presentation. And during this meditation, you might not be able to right in this moment, but even afterwards, we invite you to be aware of the earth. So let's begin by taking a few deep breaths in and out. As you breathe in, notice your body expanding into the ground. Your body and the ground become one. Imagine your breath is like the roots of a tree digging into the soil. Let your breath find its way through the cool topsoil, past the worms and the other ground critters. Visualize it as it continues down into the earth, past the bones of our ancestors, down deeper into the earth, through the bedrock, through the underground caverns and rivers and lakes, growing and pushing down, down, down. And as your breath roots deep into the earth, it spreads wide as well, like the tendrils of a tree, seeking the warm heart of the earth. Now pay close attention to your exhale. Notice the muscles and any tension in your body loosen as you breathe out and release them into the care of the earth. Release them into the roots of the trees, deep down in the soil. Now breathe in gratitude. Gratitude for sustenance from the earth into your lungs. Scripture reminds us that by the sweat of your brow, you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you will return. We are rooted within the soil, and some of our oldest spiritual practices connect us back to this source of our bodies, covering ourselves, marking ourselves with the earth, historically through covering one's body with a sackcloth and ashes, and now through Ash Wednesday, earthen crosses drawn upon our foreheads. We are from the ground, and to the ground we shall return. Now I would invite you to mentally repeat these words on your inhale and on your exhale. Inhale from dust, exhale to dust. Inhale from soil, exhale to soil. And continue the rhythm of your own breathing until I speak again. We'll breathe here for a moment. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you for reading with me in that opening prayer and meditation. And now I'll share just for a little bit about the context of Wholemakers. What is Wholemakers? Wholemakers is a groundbreaking integral ecology curriculum. It's created by young adults and for young adults. If you are heartbroken by the climate crisis, if you want to bring faith into your understanding of climate justice, if you want to change things in your community, this resource was created for you. Homemakers provides a 101 on climate science and integral ecology. This curriculum is made up of 10 sessions that include prayer and reflection, small group dialogue, individual and group activities, which we'll sample later in this program. These sessions are interactive and weave together science and faith and prayer through imagery, music, and video. The curriculum is broken into 3 tracks, which can be done individually or consecutively. There's spirituality and ecology, which orients towards theological teachings like Catholic social teaching and is rooted in Indigenous wisdom. There's also sustainability and simple living, which brings in scientific realities. We'll get a taste of that in our interactive session later. There's also social action and civic love, which provides hands-on tools and resources to mobilize your community for climate action. These sessions are between an hour to an hour and a half and have also been modified for specific audiences. That includes high school youth, college students, and a more dialogue-oriented small group setting. A group of 30 young adults came together from across the country and from various fields, including campus ministry, theology, atmospheric science, organizing, to name a few. They came together to develop this resource. You can see some of their photos on the screen. We're blessed to have part of the team that spearheaded this effort with us tonight. I'll introduce our panelists and we'll hear from them the story behind Homemakers, as well as talk about how young adults can be engaged in climate action through this resource. So we have with us Anna Johnson. Anna is the North American Senior Programs Manager for the Laudato Si movement. It's a spirit-led movement that builds, inspires, and mobilizes a global community of Catholics to care for our common home and achieve climate and ecological justice in collaboration with all people of goodwill. Prior to joining LSM, she worked for over a decade in Catholic social teaching, global solidarity curriculum design, and leadership training, particularly with youth and young adults. Witnessing and experiencing how the climate crisis exacerbates all injustice, both globally and locally, drove her focus towards ecological justice. Anna has a BA in Peace Studies and Political Science from the University of Notre Dame and an Executive Master's in Sustainability Leadership from Arizona State University. Welcome, Anna. We also have with us Emily Burke. Emily is an environmental sociology PhD student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and the social media manager at Catholic Climate Covenant. She's been involved in several interdisciplinary research studies on the response of the US Church to Laudato Si. She's also had the privilege of speaking to Pope Francis about climate change as part of the Building Bridges North-South initiative through Loyola Chicago, and spent her undergraduate years leading a fossil fuel divestment movement at Creighton University, which I should also mention was successful. Huge, well done, Emily. We also have with us Teresa Totsi. Teresa is a member of the Navajo Nation and is a director of religious education at St. Jude Catholic Church. Where she lives on the Navajo reservation, she sees firsthand the impacts of climate change on her community. For example, by persistent droughts threatening livestock, a way of life for many Navajo people. She's based on the lands of the Navajo Nation in Tuba City, Arizona. Welcome, panelists. I'll now invite you all to share a little bit more about Wholemakers, your involvement in it, and I'll begin by stopping the share so we can see each other better. And Anna, if you can start off by sharing with us how and why Wholemakers was created, a little bit more about what was the context like that drove you and this team to build Wholemakers.
Happily. Thanks so much, Diana. And it just is such an honor to be back with Teresa and Emily on this panel to talk about this process, because this was really one of my favorite things that I've ever worked on. And a huge part of that is because of this team right here. So we recognize this need arise from is a deep need within the church of recognizing where young adults were called and were feeling needs arise. And so when I was working for Maryknoll in young adult ministry, focusing and thinking about what were we hearing from young adults about what was needed. And so we did a survey of over 500 young adults across the country who had some contact with the Catholic Church. They were either Catholic still, or they had been raised Catholic and had left the faith, some connection with the Catholic Church. And of those 500 young adults, the responses that came back in said the thing that they were most concerned about for the world was care for creation, and was the situation that the earth was in. This is a situation of deep, deep concern and care. In that survey and in those conversations, we also heard just this deep need for community arising. So as we continued to discern and listen about this, we thought, okay, so what can we do to help support these young adults, of which all three of us are, but in hearing what we're called to move forward into and to create what the world needs and what young adults are calling for. And so we did further, deeper listening with young adults to hear, what is your understanding of the interrelationship between church and caring for creation? And so that led us to understand a little bit more of what they were calling for. So I'm going to share just this quick slide to show some of the results. So you can see here, no, you can't, that's way too small. But theoretically, you can see here, if it was this big blue line, that means care for creation out of the survey data results that we gathered of what people were cared about for the earth. And they said things like, I think that all of the issues listed above, which were a whole host of issues that the Catholic Church has things that they say about, could be collapsed into a single issue: respect for the dignity of all of creation. And then as we continue to dive deeper into this call to care for our common home, they really challenged us to lean into the complexity of these intersectional crises. And so to hold the values of our faith and the witness of Christ, of saying we are going to walk with the most impacted, those who are most on the margins, and also to really center Indigenous voices and the Indigenous wisdom that is so rooted in the history and the current reality of our land as we move forward into it. And that there's a deep desire for action. The folks who are the two wonderful, amazing women who are with me today have led huge things within their own communities. So Teresa moved her whole parish to become a green parish, and everything they use in the parish is like washable plates and stuff. They've minimized throwing things away significantly. And Emily led her school, her university, towards divestment, which was a huge fight and moving forward. But that was also something we just continued to hear, is that young adults feel this need for action. And we wanted to share also that it wasn't just our surveys that led us to this, and it's not just a thing that happened a number of years ago now that makes us that. But since then, the University of Bath has come out with another study that indicates this clearly, and I'm just going to read my notes here because I want to get it right. They surveyed 10,000 youth aged 16 to 25 in 10 countries around the world, including the US. They found 75% of young respondents believe, quote, the future is frightening. That found that 56% said that they felt powerless. 55% said humanity is doomed. Let me say that again. 55% of young people, that's over half, said that humanity is doomed. Now, this is where we came to think about this, and we said, we have something to offer here. As Catholics, as followers of Jesus, as people who profess a faith that is entirely rooted in the death and resurrection of someone who is both fully divine and fully human, this is where we can say, wait a second, we've got something to offer to this conversation. We're called to a radical hope. We're called to be Easter people. And so there's no faith right now that anyone is doing anything about this. And so we said, well, let's step into that. Where is that intersection of faith, hope, and love showing up? And so what we did is we gathered these amazing, this 30 young adults to come together to create this program. And we came together to discern collectively what's being called for, what would be the best, what are the 3 areas we should particularly focus in. It felt like a real community discernment process as we wrote the curriculum, we edited each other in the curriculum, we made partnerships with different people to try and root it in as many organizations as possible, and really felt empowered to move forward into building it out. So that's how it kind of came into being. Thanks for asking, Diana.
Thanks, Anna. Emily, if we could turn to you and could share with us how Homemakers is intended to engage young adults and also uplift their voices and interactions within the church.
Yeah, both great questions, both of which I'm super excited to talk about. So first and foremost, like has been said a couple times, something that I love about it is that it's super authentic, both to and for young people. So like was said, was written in community. It's meant to be experienced in community within a group or a school group or a parish group. And being a part of a community who was able to write and think up this resource and see it sort of grow into what it is today was really fulfilling for me as an individual. I will say, I remember really vividly sitting in, Zoom rooms about this size almost with other young adults from all over the country. We came from different places. We were in sort of different life stages a little bit, had totally different experiences. We would come into this Zoom room and we would compare weather events going on where we are, life events happening, and just seeing from that community this resource being built for other communities to then use and build ties within themselves was and is super cool. So what emerged from this process is super cool, and it spans many different areas of the Catholic faith. What it does, it is connects the dots between spirituality, so what's between me and God, between me and creation, simple living, so thinking about my own life as an individual, how I make sustainable choices, things like that. But then also social action, so how I exist in the world, how I, deal with other people, how I exist in community, how I look out for creation, how I answer the cry of the earth, answer the cry of the poor, things like that. So it's what I like to say, it's something that connects the dots. And that is what I think the beauty of this resource is. It allows young people to come together in community and connect these dots and then be able to sort of go out and make real change. So not only does it have super concrete reflections on, in these 3 different areas, but it also has essentially a toolkit from which young people can draw and take this resource and take what they learn and go out in their community and make like real change. So that's where engaging church leadership comes in. That's where Wholemakers can facilitate uplifting sort of young adult leadership within the church, whether that's in a parish context, a diocese context, even like a Catholic school context. I think it's no secret to anyone here that young people are leaving the church. And I think it's also no secret that bishops and priests and other lay members of the church are looking for ways to weave young people back in. I think there's a real desire there. I also think that creation care specifically is a bridge through which that can happen. And I think this resource can sort of facilitate that bridge. I think if church leadership showed in both word and action a kind of dedication to our common home that our faith calls us to, I think that would open a lot of doors for young people to come back into the church, or at least knock on those doors that have been closed, and act sort of as like a tool of evangelization. This is where young people who have sort of a concrete toolbox of resources to create change in their church community can come in, because they can facilitate these conversations with church leadership. They can facilitate these conversations with existing Catholic groups and sort of reweave young people into the church where I think they're really missing. So in my experience working in all of these different spaces, whether it's a parish space or a diocesan space or even a Catholic school space, I've found that when young people talk, when young Catholics like put their faith sort of at the forefront of whatever pitch they're making, people listen. And what is super cool about Wholemakers is it gives young people sort of a step-by-step guide to like come into that sort of prophetic role and, ask for the changes that I think are required. So like overall, in sum, it's my hope that Wholemakers, developed by a team of whom I think are incredible young people, can equip more and more young people to grow into the role of being protagonists of transformation, like Pope Francis says.
Thanks so much, Emily. I think one of the things that really stands out for me in the curriculum is that it really provides a step-by-step of how to organize within the community, how to prayerfully discern action. So it's not just about taking in the realities of climate change, but also addressing them head on in our local context. Teresa, I'm curious if you can speak to the spirituality that informs Wholemakers and your role in that process.
Yes, good evening, everybody. When I was approached with Anna Johnson's about this, as it was mentioned, I do live on the Navajo reservation where when presenting this curriculum, we were going through a really awful drought. And I do believe that where I live in between Flagstaff. If you're familiar with Arizona, Flagstaff and Page, I live in between that area. And I do believe we see the effects of climate change in this. And so when people tell me, that it's not real or anything, it affects me a little bit more, because I do see it. Like I said, I see it all the time. And then with this curriculum, I jumped at the chance, because not only was it with 3 other amazing women, but also, we have to look to Indigenous wisdom in order to facilitate anything ecologically, and with spirituality. And so with me, I never really knew that this was something that was enrooted in me since I was small. When you're an Indigenous person, you are always told, you take care of Mother Earth will take care of you. And so when we were doing this curriculum, I think what stood out for me was the 4, directions, the number, being an Indigenous person, the 4 directions, for 5 senses, and that's what we went in sorry, I can't really so, but we went into the route of that, into that of the five senses. And so for me, when we were doing this, it really put two and two together on what I was called to do, and then with Saint Kateri being the ecological saint, patron saint, and she's Native American and she's a woman and she's also Catholic. So for me, it just came full circle on what my calling was. And so I'm very proud of this work. And being now that I am a new mother, I do really think about her future in all of this. And then to hear, to see how all of the across the United States, 30 amazing young adults came to do this, and that I wasn't the only one afraid or not the only one worried about this. And to see this curriculum as it's growing, it's very you get proud of doing this. I am so sorry, it's the end of the day. I'm really trying to figure out my words right now, but yeah, so that's how with the spirituality came about. Ecological spirituality, I never knew that was the thing until we started doing this. And so as we were going along on this, it was like, oh, okay, it kind of clicks in your head like, oh, I've been doing this all my life and I never really understood this. And so now I can put it out there and more people can enjoy this and more people can know the knowledge of Indigenous wisdom. And like I said, I've mentioned this many, many times before. You can't have really anything ecologically, spirituality, climate change, or anything without an Indigenous person behind this. Just like in Laudato Si, Francis did mention that we had to look to our Indigenous brothers and sisters for the wisdom. And I do believe that we've done that in this. So
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Teresa. It is so critical that our faith teachings also and our orientation to climate brings in that Indigenous wisdom and uplifts Indigenous leadership. And we're so grateful for your contributions to Homemakers and making this curriculum happen. We have some time for questions before we go into our activity, our sample activity on Homemakers. So I invite you, if you have a question, feel free to either type it in the chat or raise your digital hand so we can see you. There's a question that has been that was inputted earlier about how the curriculum addresses the intersectionality of climate change and LGBTQ plus community values. I'll open it up to our panelists if you'd like to just touch upon on that question.
I can start, and then Emily and Teresa jump in as fits. I will say that I think that there is a deep sense of community within the LGBTQ community that helped center and root a lot of our conversations. We also wanted to recognize some of the ways in which our historical, not like to Jesus historical, but some of the ways that the church has continued to grow and move throughout the time of its existence has perhaps centered and continued some harmful ways of being in relationship with each other. And so we really tried to proactively address those and talk about how we're called to be in relationship and called to center voices that are most impacted and move forward that way. It doesn't directly intersect with LGBTQ plus text or anything like that in that way, because we really did want this to be a space in which there's an overlay of all the intersectional issues that are at play and that people can bring that to each space, but really trying to, through the process, build a sense of really care for each other and relationship for each other with the way of saying, like, when anything impacts us, that we show up for each other as well, which I think was witnessed, again, not specifically for this community, but like when the day of our presentation to the Creighton conference was the day to remember missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And the way to represent that is that you should wear orange. And so Teresa texted us and said, this is happening a lot recently on the Navajo reservation, and just feeling really moved by that. And so we were like, well, then let's all wear orange to present, right? And it's like, it wasn't even a question. It was just like, of course we do that because we are connected. And so whenever something impacts one of us, we're all impacted. So I think that is a community value of that community as well. But Emily and Teresa, do you have anything to add?
And I think for me, we tried to include all other, communities that are deeply impacted by this. For me, it's just not where we were just singling out certain communities. We tried to include, I think not the majority, but like more of that are affected by this, I think, or just I don't know how to I just don't want it to be where it's just singling out certain communities. I think that's what we didn't want to do. So I feel it's more of like we tried to do what we could for each community affected by this, which is very, I think, in a whole, almost everybody. You see the floodings, and all that are a result of climate change.
All I have to add is what Pope Francis says in Laudato Si's. We're all interconnected, and I think we really took that to heart when writing it.
We have time for one or two other questions if there's anything that folks here participating would like to ask our panel. Paul Hansen?
Yes, I'm up here in Toronto, Canada, and I'm a Catholic priest, and I worked for the Ontario Bishops' Social Affairs Commission for 11 years. And I noted in the last 5 that Laudato Si has not been picked up anywhere in the country, in the very dioceses. And I think Laudate Deum will be exactly so. In fact, in a recent poll, more people outside the Catholic story accepted the Pope's 2 writings than those within the Catholic story. Many of our young people who are so committed to climate and other issues do not see us as a valid instrument to do that kind of work. They are going elsewhere, meaning credibility. So, what is your experience, panel, and you as well, moderator? What is your experience in the United States?
I can go first. This question has taken up a lot of my personal time and energy. I spent a couple years working on a research project where I had like a team of 3, and we read every column written by a U.S. bishop between 2014 and 2019. And our question was, like, were bishops taking up Laudato Si? Top line, the answer was no. We found that of over 12,000 columns written in those years, less than 1% of them mentioned climate change. And this is like within the time range that Laudato Si is published, within the time range that Laudato Si has several year-long anniversaries. So there's just, I think, in my experience at least, I've seen firsthand that, especially in the US, Catholic leaders are largely silent about Laudato Si, about climate change. And I think that you're right on, and that's a really real experience for a lot of young Catholics. And that's what I was saying sort of before about like some doors have just been closed. And I think while I don't have all the answers, I do know that in my own life, I feel called to be a young person who remains in the church to sort of like make this call loud and clear. And so I've found myself in like several networks and several communities of other young Catholics who are doing the same thing. Wholemakers and like the team that created it being one of them. And at times it's felt very hopeless, but among other young adults and tapped into other Catholic young adult networks, I've found a lot of hope. So I don't have all the answers. I think it's the reality, but I don't think it's worth just giving up.
Definitely ditto what Emily said. I think would I love to see so much more conversation around this from bishops, from the pulpit, from our hierarchy? Yes, 100%, no hesitation. I would love to see this consistently talked about. And even if it wasn't a homily specifically about care of creation, as we know through living through this last summer, everything is connected to the climate crisis. Like any homily should at least mention it because we're yearning for that. So it was really interesting when Laudate Diem came out, because I was having a conversation with a colleague who said, there's the video that came out from the Vatican and everything. It's so dark. And I was like, young adults I've talked to are really hopeful about it, though, because we're like, finally, someone is saying our desperation, and they're putting it to paper in places of power. And they're recognizing that, the church does hold power, and not like in a bad way, but in a way that has like, we can help still influence the world, right? We do have still conversation in the role of morality. And so how do we show up in these spaces and say, this is a crisis and we need to be adequately responding in a similar way? And so that, I love that you asked this question. And that's part of the reason we wrote this curriculum, because there wasn't anything out there that helped us find this, right? There was little things that were important steps towards like finding our own carbon footprint or living more sustainably. But what young adults are hungry for is real action that's going to change the systems and structures. We can sit here and say, be shamed all day for driving the car that isn't electric to work and back. But my emissions from that are minuscule compared to fossil fuel companies, compared to the corporate structure, compared to the culture of endless growth that we live in. And so like, how are we taking that on? How are we making sure that we're making a difference in the way that will actually lead us to have a sustainable future where we can thrive and it won't just be a place of desperation? So thank you for asking this. And please like take up the call, and in taking up the call, like empower young folks to speak their hearts and minds about this too, because everyone's passionate about this. I mean, I have met very few young adults who are like terrified about the future and who don't want like voices of hope and taking on this issue. So thank you.
I echo what the panelists have shared, and just would briefly name that to the degree that church leaders and folks in ministry can name the intersectionality of this issue and can name how it interacts and affects varieties of communities, similar to the first question, how it impacts frontline communities, BIPOC communities, queer communities, etc., then there is like more and more buy-in from young adults, because there's that curiosity and hunger among young adults to really delve into the complexity, into the nuance. And so to the extent that the church can point out that intersectionality, I think more young adults are really drawn into those conversations. With that, this has been such a juicy conversation, and I'm so grateful for your contributions, Emily, Teresa, and Anna. I want this group to get a small taster of what an activity within Wholemakers looks like. So we're going to do a really modified, a really shortened version. Usually these can take between 15 to 20 minutes. We're going to do like a 5-minute exercise. And so for this, you'll need a piece of paper and a pen, and I'll lead us in reflection. So if you have one around you, if you don't have one around you, now's the time to just go grab it, and we'll begin with a short activity. This is from the Sustainability and Simple Living track. It's under the session on that is around Know That You Are Dust. And this activity is called Everyday Stuff. So I'll walk us through what we'll do. We won't go into breakout rooms. I don't think we have quite enough time. Although Ray, you flag me down if you think we do have enough time for that. But I'll just walk us through this activity right now. So you have your piece of paper, you have something that you're writing with. Now, I want you to choose one item that you use every day, or maybe nearly every day. It might be something that you see right in front of you. It could be something like a toothbrush, a coffee pot, an article of clothing, a credit card, whatever. Don't have to think too hard about it. Just choose one item and keep that in mind. Now, on your piece of paper, you'll divide your piece of paper in half, a left side and a right side. If you're feeling very artistic, feel free to draw a sketch of the item that you have in mind, but you don't have to. What I'll walk you through is we're going to talk about the item itself. So on your left side of the paper, just list some of the raw materials that were extracted from the earth to create this item. Maybe it is made of plastic, and so it's created from fossil fuels. Maybe it is created, maybe it has some rare earth materials that are part of it. Maybe it has glass, or maybe it has synthetic or natural materials. Just think through to the best of your ability what is part of that, what's created, what was used to create this item. And now on the right-hand side of your paper, write down what will happen. Where will this item go once it's lived its life, once it's discarded? And, maybe it'll go to a recycling plant, maybe it'll go to a landfill. And just jot down how long you think it will take to decompose based off of the materials that it was created out of. You might not have a scientific, like you might not have the full scope of this is how long it will take for this to break down. That's okay. We just want to sort of get our minds thinking about this item and where it's coming from and how long it takes to decompose. So I'll give another minute or so for that, and then we'll do some solo reflection. So what I'd like for you all to reflect on, and we'll have a minute for this, is how does this item help you draw nearer to God? And how does it impede your relationship with God? So taking this into consideration, this item, taking into consideration where it comes from, how it is made, how it decomposes, what happens to it. Knowing this, how does this item draw you nearer to God or impede your relationship with God? So I'll bring us back into the group. And I think I'll invite folks, if you are willing, in the chat, just to share the item that you chose and one word of how you're feeling. A lot of the items in the chat are items that we use every day: laptops, ballpoint pens, coffee cups, laptops, phones, and overall feeling seem concerned or challenged, maybe unbalanced. Someone noted too, this is maybe the first time thinking of our relationship to items in this way. I thank you for engaging and joining me in this exercise. This is, again, just a sample of what Homemakers, this activity would look like. If we were in the session, we would really go deeper and share in small groups and even in a larger group about the activity we just went through, and it would be sort of folded in within more prayer and more discussion. We don't have the opportunity for that at this moment. And so I want to acknowledge that there might be a feeling of a little unsettledness as we begin to close out our time together. I'll name that as was stated in this panel, as is the orientation of Homemakers. These sessions, this resource was created for us to take a hard look at some of the realities around the climate crisis, for us to feel it in our bodies, and also for us to know that we're not alone in this, and that we can together take communal action around climate and around this crisis. That in fact, our faith calls us to act, and not just individually, but collectively. And so as we begin to steer towards closing and moving out of this exercise, I encourage you to take note of opportunities in your communities, of ways that you can continue to engage in the work of climate action, whether that be through Wholemakers or through other mediums. I'll let you know you can find out more about Wholemakers through our website. You can download it at catholicclimatecovenant.org/homemakers. I just plugged it into the chat. We'll also send you an email on it. So if you don't get a chance to click it right now, we'll send you more information. If you're curious about how to implement Wholemakers within your community, we have a facilitator training taking place next Friday. You can register for that. It'll be an hour-long Zoom where we can more deeply go into how to make Wholemakers real in your settings. If you have further questions about Wholemakers, you can also reach out to us. I'll share my email in the chat as well. Maybe I'll loop back in. Ray, what else should we share with this group?
Yeah, I feel like our time was not enough at all to address this. This is such a bite-sized thing here, but we have the opportunity to take further steps. So if people are interested in doing something with Wholemakers, you can reach out to Diana or to myself, and we're eager to accompany you. Like, there can be a lot of questions after this, and there can be issues with how to implement, how to adapt. So we want to stay in touch with you. Just reach out for whatever you might need. But for those people who participated in developing it, like our panelists and those other young adults and people who've already started to implement this, they also start to ask, because this is such a large issue to tackle, you start to think, what's next and what can we do? One of the opportunities that we have that I think is an exciting way to build community and also engagement and excitement around the issue of care of creation is the opportunity to do something that's very hands-on through an immersion trip, which is something Maryknoll does. We do immersion trips to give people an experience of mission. So in this case, what I want to do right now is this will also go into the email, but I want to share here a link to a form for those who are interested and want to stay in touch about that. If you give us your info through this form, I will be able to reach out to you personally to give you updates. But we're planning to do an immersion trip to Yucatan, which will focus on the theme of care of creation. And one of the aspects and the reason we thought of this for that location is because, one, there is a long history of Maryknoll presence in Yucatan, especially Mérida, working with the Mayan indigenous communities there. But also, they're looking at how climate change is affecting their particular area, how it affects the jungles, the wildlife, and also NGOs that are working on sustainable agriculture. So all that stuff is kind of wrapped up into a way for people to experience something hands-on and also build community through that experience of mission and feel that renewed call and energy. So that's an opportunity we have coming up. And then staying in contact, the facilitator training that Diana mentioned. I think that might be it because we're pretty much out of time, but is there any last minute things you want to include before closing it, Diana?
Yeah, just a note that if you found this meaningful and would like more of these conversations to take place, I encourage you to support Maryknoll's mission and education program with a financial contribution. Also, if you'd like to support and to broaden Wholemakers' reach, please support our Spanish translation efforts as well. We'll have more information on how to contribute to that in a forthcoming email.
Yes, the post-event email that comes out with the recording to this will include both of those donation links. So I want to just quickly thank Diana for this partnership with us and then also our panelists for being here and sharing, and for the leadership in the development of this program. And just to conclude, I want to bring us back to that sense that we're feeling of maybe discomfort from this little reflection that we did with our relationship to the stuff around us, and then the relationship we have to the earth. So it can be overwhelming. So I just want you to take a quick deep breath so we can recenter ourselves and prepare ourselves for our closing prayer. So one of the things that is very significant about the teaching of Pope Francis and what we find in Wholemakers is that it's not just one action, one piece of action, or one approach, but it's an integral approach, and it includes everything. And the sense of a call to ecological conversion. So our conversion has to be a reorientation of how we relate to each other and to the earth. And so part of this session that we were just giving you a small sample includes a closing prayer. And so I just ask you to remember that in our history, we've had different rituals and different ways of relating ourselves to earth. One of the significant ones is a way to express repentance and remorse for our sins. And so when we think about our consumption and our relationship to the earth and we seek healing, remember that sense of ritual. And after this is over, after this workshop, maybe take a moment to go outside and get your hands dirty and touch the soil and remind yourself that we're all connected. We are the earth. We're all one. So as we think about this and continue our reflections and our work for the care of creation, let us pray. Creator of soil and seed, you crafted a world that glorifies you, that reveals your love through its inherent relationality as it ever seeks balance. Teach us to be stewards of your creation, to use our intelligence and creativity to nurture the ground, air, and water, and all the life it supports toward thriving. Grant us the wisdom of restraint so that we release to the earth only that which it can receive, so that the consequences of our excesses do not steal the bread from the tables of our most vulnerable neighbors and our own children. Your creation is our map back to our home in your love. And for that, we are ever grateful. And we pray in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you. If any last minute questions, I'm sure me and Diana can hang out for a little bit, but our emails are in the chat and there will be a follow-up email with links and information.
Thank you all. And thanks again to our panelists.